Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Everything fine? So, we are here today for 3 new chapters of About Harry, a trilogy I wrote about Harry's adulthood. I should probably mention again the disclaimer. I mention it every time, and I mention it this time too. So, I didn't invent the characters. They are covered by copyright. I just use them to entertain myself and others, and I don't make any money out of it whatsoever. Hello, Nectar. Hi. So yeah, and yeah, disclaimer being done, I should probably mention as well that I'm actually uh, posting the chapters on my website, and there is the link in the description in case you cannot be bothered to listen to me. Fair enough, but you can still read them if you want. So every week I'm just gonna post what I wrote, and it's free to download. Hello, Marco. So, I would start straight away because these 3 chapters are quite long, and yeah, I would like to stay in 1 hour, no more. So, hopefully, the connection will be good this time, and I guess we can start. Chapter 7. The Horcrux. Harry woke up with a startle. Ginny was shaking him gently. Harry, we still need to talk. Can we do it tomorrow? He felt tired and dazed, for sure not up to have any difficult conversation about Ron. No, we must do it now while Lily is asleep, and you have to change. What? Why? He felt extremely confused, but stood up and followed her out of the room. Once the door had been closed behind them, she said, You have to go to check on Hermione. I believe Hugo is at the Borough tonight, but we cannot be sure. And judging by our dilapidated living room, I don't want to imagine the state in which you will find her. Apprehension passed in Harry's eyes. I don't think he hurt her, but for sure he hasn't been gentle either, Ginny added, seeing his expression. Following her advice, he changed in his clothes in a hurry and made to go, concern commanding him to hasten. Although, following an impulse, he halted at the door, took Ginny around the waist, and kissed her. He stared into her eyes to convey all that he felt. You are an angel, and I don't deserve you. She laughed, caressing him. I'm not such a thing, and it's the other way around. Now go! She untangled from his grip and opened the door. He went out in the icy night, and focusing on Hermione and Ron's suburb, he took the step to disapparate. He made sure to appear in the cemetery behind the church, where he knew it would be dark and no muggle could spot him. He walked briskly on the main street, which was very quiet, just 2 cats about rummaging in a nearby rubbish bin. His breath formed a small cloud in front of his face. The cold was biting. He shoved his hands in his pockets to try to keep them warm. Hermione and Ron lived in a modern house with a garden in front. Harry was always reminded of number 4 Private Drive when going there. All the houses in the street looked quite the same, all with a perfect kept garden. Hermione made miracles to make it look like a normal muggle house. Just going around the building, in the back garden, one could see it couldn't possibly be what it seemed like. In the whole atmosphere, there was a palpable feel of magic. It was very wild, with kids' brooms and magical toys lying around. Few garden gnomes were running freely. Hermione had taken them there for the fun of Crookshank. Now that the cat was no more, they proliferated very well. He stopped on the front door, undecided on what to do. What if Ron was in there? For sure he wouldn't take it well. He walked up and down unsure. All the lights were out. If Ron was back at home and raged against him, he wouldn't just go to bed, he supposed. Probably he wasn't there. He dared a knock at the door. Nobody answered. He tried again with more conviction. Nothing. He decided to get inside anyway, to make sure Hermione was fine. He walked to the back door, took the wand out, and whispered a spell to open it. Hermione and Ron told him how to do it in case of an emergency, and this was definitely an emergency. Everything was dark inside the kitchen. The moonlight was projected on the furniture, creating long shadow, but everything seemed tidy, as he used to see it. He moved very quietly, trying to avoid any noise, past the kitchen door, and coming from the lounge, he heard a sob. Hermione was sitting in a corner, in the shadow. She was all curled up, immobile. A glimmer of light coming from the window was upon her fingers, interlocked, her arms around her knees, her forehead lean on them. Harry stared at her for a moment. He was relieved in finding her unarmed, but he was also reminded of the night Ron left them 19 years before. He was the same position, the same distress. He pronounced her name. She jumped out in fright, emitting a high-pitched shrill, and then, recognizing Harry, she pressed her hand on her chest, panting. "Blimey, Harry, did you want to give me an heart attack or something?" "I'm sorry, I knocked at the door, but nobody answered, and I thought I'd come quietly in case..." Her face was all blotched and swollen. The pallid light was reflecting in her wet eyes, and he could read all the emotion she had endured that evening. "In case Ron was here, I gather he came to visit you." She sniffed. She must have been crying for hours. "Is Hugo here?" She shook her head. "Thankfully not. I guessed he would come to you. He was in such a rage. I've never seen him like that. He looked demented. I feared him and what he could do." She looked at him inquiringly. But he didn't feel like explaining yet. He had a more pressing question to ask her. "Why the hell did you tell him? Why, after almost 20 years, did you tell him? What was the need?" She looked aghast at his reproach. "It's not exactly I told him. I'm sorry, Harry, but to be honest, I'm very surprised he didn't find out before. When we got together, I thought everything was going to come out, and I was prepared to lie in case that would happen. Even if, to be truly honest, I didn't exactly know what I would have said. But it didn't. And after so many years, I was sure it wouldn't happen anymore. When he asked me tonight, it took me by surprise. I wasn't prepared. And I understood straight, and he understood straight away it was you by my hesitation. I tried to explain to him, but he wouldn't listen. He yelled horrible things at me, and he just stormed out before I could stop him." Harry was at loss. "But why did you think he would find out?" She looked at him impatiently. "Harry, don't be such a simpleton. It was the first time for both of us. It doesn't leave trace on men, but it does on women, most unfortunately," she exclaimed bitterly. Comprehension doomed on him. Strangely, he never really thought about that. To be honest, he had never even thought about it again. After Ron returned that night, 19 years before, everything started to happen with a pressing pace up to the duel with Voldemort. And when he succeeded in beating him, all kinds of different events started to happen. He was finally starting to live his life without the threat of death. He just never paused to reflect on it. But then, a doubt appeared in his mind. "How come did you realize it now, then?" Harry asked, sitting beside her. She frowned and relaxed in a more comfortable position. "I have no idea. Besides that today he spent the day with Lee. You know how he boasts about his love life. Maybe he told him something that made him realize he wasn't the force with me." They were silent. This is really bothering. I'm gonna try this time. If it doesn't work, if it just get crushed again, I'll just give up. I'll just give up and I call the telephone company and they will hear me out. Anyway, I'm just not gonna read everything again. I cannot be bothered. I will start from where I left. And now I just need to remember where I left. Um, let's see. Thank you, Lector. Oh, I'm so sorry. You must bear it with me. Okay, I think I'll start it again from here. How come did you realize it now then? Harry asked, sitting beside her. She frowned and relaxed in a more comfortable position. I have no idea. Besides that today he spent a day with Lee. You know how he boasts about his love life. Maybe he told him something that made him realize he wasn't the force with me. They were silent for a couple of minutes. They never really acknowledged those nights to each other. The wish to pretend it never happened was so strong they tacitly agreed not to mention it. Harry, though being open, would have been awkward, but he realized with relief that he wasn't. Ginny was right. It happened a long time ago in a difficult moment of their life, but it actually never affected their friendship afterward. However, he felt the need to apologize, an apology long overdue. I'm sorry, Hermione. What for? She asked, puzzled. For the night. I'm sure you would never have done it. I behaved shamefully. Hermione smiled. You are sweet, but it's not as you raped me or anything. I was there. I've done it too. I was perfectly aware of what I was doing. I just felt so. He completed that sentence. Lonely. She nodded. It was lucky you never got pregnant or anything. She stared at him. Lucky? Well, yeah. She rolled her eyes. Harry, your ingenuity is disarming. It wasn't luck. I knew how to let it happen. This was unexpected. You mean a spell? Of course I mean a spell. Somebody had to think of it, and since you didn't seem to bother. But how could you possibly know? Harry thought about the Hogwarts library. For sure, she couldn't have learned it from there. She rolled her eyes again even more. Harry, I spent 6 years in the same dormitory with other four girls, and even if in the male one it sounds like you probably just spoke about Quidditch, it wasn't the same in ours. And believe me when I say they weren't as saint as me. He startled. Bloody hell, who was Parvati having sex with? She slapped him on the shoulder, scowling. We are not here to speak about Parvati's love life. But then she relented, laughing a little. Well, actually, since it was such a long time ago and we don't see her anymore. She approached him with an air of complicity and, giggling, told him a story about a muggle boy she had met over the summer and all that happened. Harry laughed, amused at this 20-year-old gossip, and they kept snickering for a while over Parvati's teenage lover, and it was almost like being back in the Gryffindor common room in front of the roaring fire for a moment. But unfortunately, they weren't teenagers anymore. They weren't in the Gryffindor's common room, but in Hermione's place, and Ron had just tried to use a Cruciatus curse on Harry. The silence that followed, the, the silence that followed the momentary merriment, swept away the remaining laughter, bringing them back to the unhappy reality of the situation, and the guilt of what they had done weighed on their shoulder heavier than ever. I should probably go. Ginny's waiting, and she must be very worried by now, Harry said, looking at his watch. Hermione's eyes widened with concern. How? She started to say. She's alright. She understands and doesn't blame us. Although, I can tell you, it hasn't been a fun Saturday night. Harry filled her in about what had passed, and while he was explaining, a look of incredulity dawned on her. An unforgivable course? She exclaimed aghast. Where do you think he's now? At the borough? I have no clue. We will find out. I don't think we can do much now. It was already past midnight. Look, Hermione, I must go. It's late, but I'm not letting you here. You come with me. You can sleep in James' room. He stood up in a hurry now. It wouldn't have looked at all well in Ron's eyes to find him there with Hermione, and leave her there alone was out of the question. He didn't think he could trust Ron if he decided to return home. She didn't need to be persuaded. Probably she felt the same way. She packed the few things she needed, and they swiftly left the house. Ginny was waiting for them, and Harry could see relief on her face as she opened the door, seeing them safe and sound. Hermione, on the other side, was hesitating. She stopped on the threshold, unsure about Ginny's possible reaction. Harry felt suddenly very awkward, his glance shifting from one to the other, and would have loved to melt away in the wall behind him. However, Ginny didn't even allow her to speak. She hugged her and pulled her gently inside. You are going to catch cold. Come into the kitchen. Hermione, under the hug, widened her eyes, surprised by the affectionate reception. Harry could see she was trying to repress tears, and, as if the hug was directed to him, felt again at ease and grateful in having such a strong, wonderful woman beside him. Hermione followed Jean meekly, and they sat around the table. But once there, they found themselves at loss for words. Hermione broke the uneasy silence first. What do we do? I don't know, Ginny said. But this is not going to be easy, like at all. She paused to think. He called you a liar. He says something about a Horcrux something. What does it mean? What did you tell him? She asked, turning to Harry. He looked inquiringly at Hermione, who nodded slightly. They never told anybody about the Horcrux, agreeing that the fewer people knew about it, the better. Yet, now, they had no choice but to explain. Harry told her briefly what they were, and she took an horrified look. So that's why you know who managed to return after he tried to kill you as a baby? Yes, he admitted, and trying to kill me made me an involuntary Horcrux. That's why I could see Nagini attacking your father. I wasn't possessed. I just had a piece of Voldemort's soul inside me, and I could see through his eyes when he was killing and torturing people and stuff. He didn't elaborate further, seeing the bewildered look on Ginny's face. You never told me any of this. Why? He became suddenly impassioned. It doesn't matter now. It's Ron we are talking about, and there is something else. He addressed Hermione. Even you don't know about this. When I opened the locket, it didn't just scream as we told you then. And he explained to them the truth of what happened, of Voldemort's voice speaking Ron's fears and insecurity, and about the two figures of him and Hermione appearing from the locket kissing, and her words saying that she loved Harry and didn't care about him. It was a very painful moment to him, he concluded. Hermione had eyes as big as two saucers. This is what really happened? He nodded. Obviously, I couldn't tell you without betraying him, and after he smashed it, I told him that you cried for days after he left, and that I loved you as a sister and nothing more, and it was the same thing for you, which was true. She was speechless. This makes everything 10,000 times worse, Ginny said as a matter of fact. That's what he wanted to say when he left. Harry's expression turned puzzled. Didn't you hear it? Ginny asked, raising her eyebrows in surprise. He snapped. I don't know if you noticed, but I was very occupied trying to keep up a Protego charm not to be killed, and at the same time worried about what you were thinking about me. He said something like she was the only thing. Harry, I'm sure that he meant to say that she was the only thing she won over you. Silence fell again. Hermione was swimming in tears by then. Probably all his old insecurities returned in an even greater form finding that out. Ginny added pensively, rubbing her face, passing Hermione an handkerchief that was received gratefully. She looked tired and worried. There is not much else we can do now anyway. We better go to bed, and tomorrow we call Mom and Dad to see if he's there. And if he's not, we will try to find out where he is. Ginny spoke with determination, but Harry could feel hesitation behind her words. What would they do once they found him? This wasn't something they could solve easily just talking face to face. When Ginny and Harry were in bed, sensing his distress, she hugged him tightly in the dark. We will fix this. I don't know how, but we will. Don't worry, she told him softly. He let himself relax in her arms, but didn't answer. He wasn't positive. There were too many unresolved issues between him and Ron that couldn't be fixed so easily or soon. If ever, Harry told himself with dismay. This is the end of chapter 7. We made it. Unbelievable, but we made it. Now I'll drink some water and I'll carry on. Okay. Chapter 8. George's Help. The next morning, Ginny shook Harry to wake him up. Harry, get up! You have already slept enough. On the other side, it felt like he had barely slept 10 minutes. With his eyes still closed, he grunted with disapproval. Do you know that some wives wake their husbands up with a kiss and a cup of coffee? Or even better, they don't wake him up at all? He hid his head under the pillow to protect his eyes from the light she had mercilessly turned on. She half smiled, taking away the pillow. Lucky husbands! Get up and come down. It's 7 o'clock already. 7 o'clock? He repeated, more upset than ever. You must be joking. I barely slept 6 hours. I know, but we have to find Ron, she said with finality, leaving the room. He didn't move while in meditation. He felt sour and less sympathetic with Ron than ever before. Why did he have to ruin his Sunday looking for a person that only the day before tried to curse him and scare the hell out of Ginny and Lily? Because he's your best mate, and if we came to this, it is also your fault, the voice inside him replied with some reason. He heaved a sigh, and very slowly, trying to regain his faculties, started to get down. From the living room, he could hear Lily and Hermione chatting animatedly. Lily had been delighted to find her aunt there, and she was submerging her with a torrent of words. Thankfully, they weren't directed to him. Do you know, Aunt Hermione, I almost decided I want to be a Ravenclaw when I go to Hogwarts. The founder was beautiful, and she had a tiara, and she has got a treasure. Hermione laughed, pleased by all her enthusiasm. I know, right? I was almost chosen for Ravenclaw myself, and do you know that their dormitory is up on a tower, and I can see the lake and Docksmaid and all kinds of beautiful things? Hermione was sitting on an armchair, and Lily was in front of her, on the rug, still in her fluffy pink pyjama. Can you please not encourage her in this? Said Harry, once in the room, to Hermione. Lily ran to him, jumping in his arms, all excited. Did you see, Daddy? Aunt Hermione's here. She actually slept here. She surprised us. He lifted her, and they rubbed their noses. You are so soft, and you smell like milk and biscuits. She laughed gaily. I had milk and biscuits just now. Good. I deserve some breakfast too, I think, he replied, putting her down. Now, Give your dad some time to return down on Earth and go dress yourself. She sprinted upstairs with enthusiasm. She's so full of energy, Hermione said, smiling. I know, even a bit too much, I'd say, if you consider what time is it. She told me I had to tell Ron we didn't kiss, so you two could make peace. He nodded and yawned. She thinks that is what Ron thought had happened. A silly friend told her that's why couple break up. I see, she smiled. Did you already hear from the Barrow? She shook her head, her smile vanishing quickly. As she was opening her mouth to answer, they heard Ginny calling out urgently for Hermione from the kitchen. They hastened there. She was kneeling in front of the fireplace, and there, blazing in the glowing embers, they could see Neville's face. He looked at them, entering the room, and without even a greeting, he started to speak in agitation. Hermione, I was looking for you. I tried to your place and you weren't there, and I guess I would find you here. She crouched close to Ginny, in front of the fire. What's happened? I could ask you the same thing. Blimey! Ron is here, at Hogwarts, in the hospital wing. She startled. Is he hurt? Is not, but he gave us a fright, all right? Especially McGonagall. She's not that young anymore, but in the end it was her who stunned him. Stunned him? Why? He came here yesterday in the middle of the night. He made such a fuss at the gate asking for me that the caretaker thought best to wake me up. He was drunk. He started to shout that he was there to take Rose away, insulting you and Harry. I didn't know what to do with him. He wouldn't calm down, so I sent for McGonagall and she used the stunning spell on him. We brought him to the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey enervated him and made him drink a sleeping potion. Rose Rose doesn't know he's here, and we are not planning to tell her for the moment. What's happened? They were all speechless, with their mouth half open, surprise mingled with horror. I. We had an argument yesterday, said Harry, clearing his throat uneasy. He didn't take it well. It didn't take it well? Bloody hell, Harry! He almost wake up the whole castle. Um, he found out something about the past, about me and Hermione, and he didn't like it. He was starting to feel hot around the neck. Hermione was looking at the floor, and Ginny straight into the fire, her gaze fixed and her posture rigid. Neville didn't speak for a moment, looking from Harry to Hermione and Ginny, and then in stupor. Do you mean to say it was long time ago? He blurted out before Neville could finish the sentence. There was no reason to explain to him everything. Even before me and Ginny and Hermione and Ron, it was a mistake. Blimey, Harry, he said with amazement. How could you do it to your best mate? Everybody could see that Ron was head to toe in love with Hermione. She blushed furiously, and Harry became scarlet, replying defensively. It was a difficult circumstance, and it's not like I've done it on purpose to hurt him. It just happened, and it was a mistake, and please keep it to yourself for heaven's sake. And it was two of us doing it, if I remember properly. Why is it only my fault now? Okay, all right, but still. Now I understand why he was so upset, poor Ron. Poor Ron? He snapped, starting to feel annoyance rising. He almost tried to kill me yesterday. Well, you can't blame me, really, Neville retorted, deep in reflection. What do we do now? He will wake up eventually. Harry felt like arguing the point, but Ginny answered before him in a practical tone. We will send George straight away to pick him up. Hopefully, he will make Ron see reason. Don't let Rose know he's there. Better if she doesn't see him now. She could get scared. Neville nodded. I must go now. I will wait for George, he said, disappearing before another word could be added from the flame. Ginny stood up in haste, lighting up with determination. Harry, we must go and wake him up. He will be delighted, Harry replied, raising slowly, his determination being at the lowest point, imagining George's reaction at being woken up on Sunday at 8 o'clock. I'm going to take Hugo from the barrow, Hermione stated with a troubled expression, probably fearing another attempt by Ron to take the kids away. You are right, you must do that. We can drop Lily at Andromeda and Ted's. She'll be happy, and then we can go to George. She ran up the stairs to get her, and after less than 10 minutes, they were all ready to go. Lily, all excited at the prospect to spend some time with Ted, and Harry, Hermione, and Ginny, tense with worry. Hermione, after having thrown some flu powder, stepped in the fireplace as Harry said, "All right, Hermione, we will keep in touch. We'll tell George to try to take Ron to his place so you can go home, and if you need, send an owl." She nodded nervously. "The burrow!" she shouted, and she was gone soon after. "Do we go with the flu powder too?" Lily asked eager. For some reason, she loved it. "No, we don't want to be rude arriving there uninvited," explained Ginny. "We will disapparate in front of their door and will knock, so they won't be frightened." Once outside, Harry took both their hands and took the step, focusing on Tongue's place. Andromeda was awake. Like all old people, she woke up very early. Ted was sleeping. Like all young people, he slept until late. They apologized for the hour, naming an emergency. But she didn't ask for any explanation. She was always pleased to take care of Lily. And, refusing a breakfast offer, which really tempted Harry, who hadn't yet had any, they marched straight to George, who obviously wasn't awake yet. He led a most extravagant life, his creativity whims robbing him of a normal routine. He could be seen having breakfast at 2 in the afternoon or having dinner at midnight. Whenever an idea for some new merchandise struck his mind, he had to work on it, being at 5 in the morning or at 6 in the evening. He was anyway not an early riser, quite the opposite. Going there at 8 o'clock, they were sure to find him asleep, and if, by any chance, he was awake, that meant only that he hadn't gone to bed at all. He still lived in the small apartment above the joke shop. He had never wanted to move anywhere else. Everybody was of the opinion that it would have been better for him to move somewhere new, not to be haunted by Fred's presence. But he had always refused categorically, I'm sorry, categorically. Well, you understood. It had already been a few years that Lee had moved away. He was living on his own and seemed contented of his situation. They knocked at the door with insistence to wake him up, until George, with a murderous glare, opened the door violently. His mouth was wide open, ready to shout at the disturber, but when he realized Harry and Ginny were the disturbers, stopped in his track. Although he didn't look more conciliating either. "Do you realize what time is it?" He apostrophized them with a furrowed tongue, his hair going in all directions. "It's an emergency," Ginny said, pushing him to get inside. The place was a mess like usual. Clothes on the floor everywhere, a mountain of dirty plates in the sink, empty bottles and rubbish of every kind on the table. They freed some chairs from a stack of Weasley Wizard Weasley's catalogues and sat down around it. George, with a snort, slammed the door and went to the kitchen. Do you want some breakfast?" he asked grudgingly, looking for the coffee machine between the dirty plates. "Yes, please." "No, thank you," Ginny interrupted Harry. "George, something bad happened and we need your help." A look of concern passed on George's face, supplanting the frown. He stopped his search and made to sit in front of them, while Ginny started to recount what had occurred. "Yesterday, Ron had a fight with Hermione. He came to our place and tried to curse Harry. He doesn't want you or anybody else of the family having contact with him anymore, and he tried to get Rose from Hogwarts. He was drunk, they had to stun him, and now he's in there, in the hospital wing, sleeping. George looked at her transfixed for a few seconds without moving. He then made to speak, but stopped again, passing a hand in his hair. I beg your pardon, he managed to say in the end. Ginny rolled her eyes. George, wake up! This is important. We need you to go there to pick him up. Try to calm him down and keep him here. George rubbed his face and said, Ginny, sorry, I just woke up. I basically had 3 hours sleep. I don't get it. What in the name of hell happened? Why did they argue? What does Harry have to do with it? All right, Harry told himself. Here we go again. And he was about to tell his rehearsal story when Ginny blurted out. Harry shagged Hermione when they were 17, and Ron found it out. Bloody hell, Ginny! Harry sprinted on his feet, surprised and greatly embarrassed by her bluntness. But George suddenly exploded in a roar of laughter that almost made him fall from the chair. Ginny reddened in anger, while George, with tears in his eyes, gave Harry a strong pat on the shoulder. Well done, Harry, he said between laughter. I was always a bit concerned about you, all these women buzzing around, and you just sticking to Ginny and her alone. Now I know you had some fun before her. Harry flushed to the root of his hair and stammered incomprehensible words while George kept laughing like his life depended on it. Ginny stood up, banging her hands on the table. George, this is not a laughing matter. This is serious. George made an effort to suppress the amusement, succeeding clumsily. I'm sorry, Ginny. It was unexpected. Do you want me to go and pick him up? Still gulping, trying to regain composure. Yes, you must calm him down and keep him here far from Hermione and from Harry, at least for the time being. He tried to use the Cruciatus curse on him. Harry was sure she said that only to sober him up, and he worked the trick. The Cruciatus curse on Harry? But why? Didn't you hear what I just said? Ginny asked impatiently. You know I've just half of it. He smirked, pointing at the hole in his head where his ear should have been. But seeing the expression on Ginny's face, he sobered up. Sorry, couldn't resist. They were 17. Come on, they have always been friends since. Why is he a problem now? Ginny let herself fall again limply on her chair. Oh, please, George, you speak as if you don't know him. You know how all about his inferiority complex, especially with Harry around. It has been a blow to him. I have always wondered why we all straight away. All right, I'll go. He found the coffee machine right at the bottom of the sink, under a pile of dirty dishes, pots, and pans, and started to look for the coffee in the cupboard. Obviously, you take this to the grave, Harry threatened him with a stern stare. Nobody else need to know. Shame. It was a good piece of gossip, George said, looking disappointed. But Ginny intervened. We need to tell my parents. And maybe Bill and Percy too. You are kidding, I hope. Does the whole world need to know? Harry exclaimed, turning to her in alarm. Oh, Harry, do you prefer that they hear it from our mouth or Ron's? Fair point, said George, that having localized the coffee, he had placed the machine on the fire. Okay, all right, Harry surrendered. But please, I beg you, he implored Ginny. You tell them when I'm not there. I don't want to go through it again, not with your parents anyway. How many times did you have to tell already? Asked George, out of curiosity, looking for clean cups while the coffee was grumbling gently in the machine. A strong aroma was pervading the room, making Harry's belly grow louder. A few times, said Harry with a sigh, and it's distressing, I can tell you. There are worse things, I say. It is not as if you killed somebody. If Ron wasn't the biggest prat, he would see in the same light too. George found 3 cups and served them a black coffee without sugar to save him another quarter of an hour searching. That they sipped in silence, savoring the bitter flavor, all deep in their respecting reflections. Harry, on what step to take next, and George was mumbling about incarcerate spell and full body bind curse. On the door, Ginny asked George, "You will let us know, will you?" "As soon as I have the chance. I will make the brat see reason. Don't worry," he reassured them. "And George," Ginny added just before turning away, "your place is indecent. It looks like a pigsty. Tidy up, please." He smirked and closed the door behind them. Okay, and this was the end of chapter 8. Let me see what you wrote. Mm. Yeah, I totally agree. He has to get over it, but I can imagine why he can't. I mean, it's actually true. Ron didn't get like anything, didn't get fame, didn't get, I don't know, whatever. He was always in the shadow. The only thing he got was Hermione, and then finding out that it was second with her too. We all see what happened. Okay, so we can carry on, I guess, with chapter 9, the last one, which is a bit long, this one too. And it's super hot here. No bed for a Gryffindor. Okay, so let's carry on. Chapter 9, Ted's warning. Eccolo. And my cat has decided that this is the moment for cuddle and showing his bottom on the word. Wait. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Hopefully he understood the message. Okay. No, it doesn't seem okay. He understood. Okay. Chapter 9, Ted's warning. When they got home, they ate a late breakfast in silence. Once over, Ginny announced him of her intention to hear from the barrow. Harry took the hint immediately. He had to vacate the kitchen, and he did so straight away. He had no intention whatsoever to see the expression of his mother and father in law to the declaration of what he had done. Ron was their son, and it would have been only natural for them to side with Ron against him. He didn't know what to expect, and it was best to let Ginny deal with it. She would have known how to talk to them. He walked to the living room and lay down on the sofa to have a nap. He needed to recuperate some lost sleep. The worst was surely still ahead, and he wanted to face it well rested. He closed his eyes, but couldn't fall asleep. His mind was too occupied by worries. What if they actually sided with Ron? What could he do? He couldn't bear to tear a family apart, especially a family as united as theirs. They had welcomed arms open when he declared his intention to marry Ginny, and they've always treated him like a son. He didn't have any other family but that one. Would they feel betrayed? But surely not. If not even Ginny felt that way, why should they? It was nonsensical, and it was anyway a very silly thing, the one that happened. Ron and Hermione weren't even together at the time. Are we trying to justify ourselves? His inner voice asked. He ignored it, but he knew very well how it could be considered silly by somebody like George and Ginny, but how different it was for somebody else, like Neville, Ron, and perhaps his parents. After what seemed a very short time, Ginny sat close to him. She kissed him on the forehead, and he could smell coffee. He smiled, amused. So much better now, don't you think? He grabbed her around the waist, more awake than ever, and tried to pull her close to him. Let's see if you can do even better, said mischievously. She replied with merriment in her voice. I've got a cup of boiling coffee in my hand. If you don't want it to fall straight on you, I'd stop doing what you are trying to do right now. Perhaps I'll take the risk. He stared at her intensely. It seems worth it. She giggled under his gaze, but she didn't let herself be persuaded. Don't you want to know what my parents said instead? He frowned. Actually, I don't think it's a fair exchange since one doesn't exclude the other. But go ahead. They knew already. Hermione explained everything when she picked you up. He rised, sitting beside her, and looked quizzical for what was coming. She continued. They didn't get upset, although they are very worried for you, for Ron, and for Ron's kids. They didn't hear from him yet, but they expect him soon enough. They told me to send you their love and the assurance that they would try to talk to him on your behalf. He felt his heart warming toward them. He felt lighter, relieved, and more positive now he knew he had their support. Finally, a tiny ray of hope was appearing on the horizon. For sure, Molly, if George failed, could make him see reason. She was his mother, after all. For sure, she knew how to handle him. That's great news, he said, taking the cup from her hand and leaving it on the coffee table. Now, you were trying to wake me up, and I was ready to see if I could obtain more than a kiss, he said, his hands traveling on her body already. She grasped his hands, though, and kept them firmly in her own. Harry, keep still. I want to talk to you about something else. Harry sighed, impatient. What do you want to talk about? Hermione, she said sternly. I never really questioned myself on you two, but since the recent event, I thought it over, and I want you to clear a few things up for me. All right. What do you want to know? He asked, unsecure, feeling again to be on dangerous ground. Her reaction on finding out had been indeed smoother than what he thought it would be. He was expecting something of the kind. I want to know how things stand between you and Air. Ginny, I don't understand. We have already talked about this. We are friends, period. Where did she want to get with it? Hasn't been clear enough? I know, but I want to explore the thing a bit better. You are very physical, for example. What do you mean? He asked, perplexed. You always hug and kiss each other. You take her by the hand. Does it bother you? It doesn't mean anything, but if it bothers you, I'll stop. Now that she mentioned it, he realized that it was true. They were physical. It had always been like that. It felt natural, and he had never suspected could raise doubt or jealousy from Ginny. Given the chance, would you have sex with her? She asked bluntly. For heaven's sake, Ginny, of course not. Why? She asked, staring piercingly at him. Harry grunted. What kind of question is this? Isn't it obvious? I still want to hear the answer, she replied steady. Harry answered resigned. Because I'm married to you, she's married to my best mate, and I'm not attracted to her anyway. While to you. As he said, he tried to free his hands still on hers to start again where he had been interrupted, but she didn't let go. He then started to kiss her neck, but she interrupted him. Harry, stop! I'm not finished! Harry sighed again, on the verge of tears, and laid his forehead on her shoulder. Is there a point to this conversation? Yes, there is. I want to understand. You will just answer my question, and I want you to answer honestly and truthfully. All right? He nodded. Can I have my hands back? If you keep them where I can see them. And letting them go, she continued. If I wasn't part of your life, and Ron wasn't there, and you were both single, and she made a move to you, would you have sex with her? Why does this question sound very much like a trap to me? He asked, not very willing to fall into it. You said you were going to answer honestly. Think about it. He took a big breath and started dwelling on it. He had always given friendship with Hermione for granted. He never meditated too much on it. They had grown up together, and she had always been like a sister. But she wasn't a sister, really. She was good looking enough. He was sure he could never fall in love with her. He didn't feel that way at all. Yet, just sex? Perhaps yes. He had done it once, he could do it again, even if it would be different. They were under serious pressure back then. Now, it would have meant having sex with her, knowing exactly with whom and why he was having it. He realized at the moment that he had never actually even seen her body. They had always made quite sure that darkness was complete. They didn't want to see each other. He told them to pretend it didn't happen, and even now his memories of it were blurred. He shrugged his shoulders. Yeah, he answered truthfully. Maybe I would. It'd be bizarre in a way, but I do it. And then, realizing what he had just said, added quickly, mind, she wouldn't be less of a friend to me for that. It would be just for fun, like once done, friends as before. And only, and I mean this, only if you had never been born. He started to kiss her behind the ear. And how empty and miserable my life would have been. She relaxed under his kisses. Okay, I'm satisfied. Harry brightened. Great! I don't understand why, but great. Now can we? Jean interrupted him. I'm satisfied because you have been honest. I can see that she is just a friend to you, and I don't see any danger of you falling in love with her. But have you ever stopped to think how she feels about you? Harry looked at her questioning. What do you mean? She feels the same way, obviously. No, Harry, it is not that obvious, she said sternly. Men and women are different. She started speaking using the patronizing tone one would use to explain to a child that 2 plus 2 is 4. Harry felt annoyed. I know. Jean interjected. Don't interrupt me, just listen. You, men, can do stuff without thinking twice about the possible interpretation and consequences. You are a bit simple and more easygoing, while women ponder about everything, and I mean everything. Every gesture, every word and feeling, we give them meaning and we analyze them over and over again. Jeez, it must be tiring. Ginny raised her eyebrows. You have no idea. Anyway, she continued, for example, you can have sex just for fun, but women, 9 to 10, will feel involved in a way or another. And I'm telling you this to put you on your guard. All this intimacy with Hermione could be read in a different way from her. That poor woman is starving for affection, and right now you are giving it to her. Harry paused, reflecting on what she said, and then laughed. Nah, that's impossible. She see me only as a friend. I'm sure we grew up together. She grew up with Ron too, she replied with a meaningful look. Point taken. He wavered for a second and then shook his head. No, Ginny, you are wrong. She could never fall for me. She said that all the time. Okay, you know her better than me, and that being said, you can hug her as much as you like. I'm not jealous, and I won't bring the topic forward again. I said what I wanted to say, she concluded. Finally, he uttered. Can we have sex now? I can't remember the last time we have done it with the sun shining outside instead of sneaking during the night worrying about Lily butting in. And I'm warning you, we won't have another chance until she goes to Hogwarts, and it's 5 years from now. Ginny rolled her eyes annoyed. Can you just think about sex? If I'm not wrong, it is you that brought up the topic first. And anyway, no, of course not, he answered seriously. After we have it, there is usually a lapse of time where I can think of other stuff too. He paused and then added, but usually it doesn't last more than 15 or 16 minutes. Ginny laughed and then smiled mockingly. Jeez, it must be tiring. He grinned back. You have no idea. And he kissed her, without being rejected this time. Late in the afternoon, he was in front of Ted and Andromeda's place. Looking at it, he could not avoid being reminded of when he crashed in their garden pursued by Voldemort just before his 70th birthday. Hagrid was there too. He felt a pang of nostalgia. He passed away just a few years back. He was already old and died in his sleep in his hut in Hogwarts. He never retired but kept working almost until the last moment. They knew, like him, that it was going to happen soon. So they managed a last encounter before the approaching moment. It was a very sad event for them, but they were glad he didn't suffer and he left in a most peaceful way. Under his request, he was buried in the Forbidden Forest, and despite this, many people were present to pay their goodbyes, centaurs included. Andromeda welcomed him warmly and told me that Lily was with Ted in his room. When he entered, he found a very bizarre scene in front of him. Ted was sitting on the floor, legs crossed. His hair was long, sleek, and pure white. Lily, behind him, with a look of utmost concentration, was applying clips and ribbon on it in a most unusual fashion. They greeted him without changing their demeanor. Lily was tying a lock of hair with a ribbon just on the top of Ted's head, and she kept on working studiously. Lily, what are you doing? Asked Harry. I'm showing Ted how to fix his hair for the next time he will meet Victoire, so she will love him even more. She folded a lock of hair carefully to form a circlet and fixed it with a bow. I see, Harry said seriously. Yes, Ted, I think it definitely brings out your charm. He chuckled, but kept still to let her finish. Make it blue now, Lily asked in an imperative tone. Lily, don't be bossy and ask politely. I'm sorry, Dad. She looked at him, repenting, and then asked again. Daddy, could you make your hair blue, please? He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the hair was of a bright electric blue. Lily emitted a shrill of joy, looking at the lovely color. She clipped a last lock and turned around to face him, admiring her work. How do I look? Ted asked, smiling at the two of them. Unusual? Beautiful! Harry and Lily said at the same time, one with skeptical look and the other with their eyes glinting. Thank you, Lily. You are a genius with hair, Ted complimented her, looking at himself in the mirror, amused at what he saw. Why don't you go to Grandma to ask for a cup of cocoa? I want to speak with your dad for a sec. She ran gaily out of the room, all pleased by his approbation. How are you? How did Lily behave? Asked Harry, leaning against the door's frame. Ted, who was removing all the clips from his hair, answered, I'm fine, and she behaved very well as usual, if we don't consider that she woke me up basically at sunrise. 9 o'clock? Harry asked with a grin. 9:30 for your information, and it's basically sunrise at Sunday, he replied, half smiling at him. He messed with his hair, that, under the touch, became shorter and turned back white as he usually wore it. Ted had started training as a healer in St. Mungo's Hospital the year before. He was challenging, but he was very satisfied with it. Harry had suggested him to become an Auror when he was still in school. He had all the qualities for it, and a metamorphomagus was always useful in the team, but he had refused. He had explained to Harry, without taking away anything from your profession, I prefer to save lives than destine them to madness or death in Azkaban. He was very critical about the justice system in the magical world. If they come out worse than when they went in, he would say. Harry, who was dealing mostly with dangerous dark wizard, couldn't always see his point, and told him so. Ted had, Ted had his answer ready. I'm pretty sure most of those dark wizards have got very unhappy backgrounds, or they wouldn't have become what they became. And I feel confident in saying, and I don't mean this to justify or excuse, that if we dug even in you know who's past, we would surely find out that he had a very unhappy childhood and hadn't been much loved. Maybe some of those dark wizards could still be saved with some effort, but definitely not in Azkaban. Check and mate. He grew up to be very much like Tonks in looks and more like Lupin in character. He was tall and lanky, always wearing jumpers 3 sizes bigger than his own, and ripped tight jeans. He was a quiet person, a good listener, open minded, and very mature for his age. Harry often wondered where all his wisdom was coming from. He felt like Ted was the older of the two sometimes. I need to talk to you, he said, as he beckoned him to sit on the bed while going to close the door. Harry felt like he was about to be told off and laughed a little. He did as he was asked, however, ready to listen. First of all, I wanted to thank you for inviting me again to live with you the last time we met. It really means something. It really means a lot to me. But you know I can't. Grandma would go crazy. I will live here until I move into a place of my own. Harry was sorry. On the other hand, it was no more than he was expecting. Andromeda was very attached to Ted. He had been her comfort after the death of her husband and Tonks, and she had always covered him with affection and love. She would have felt very lonely if he would have chosen to go to Harry's place, and he respected Ted for taking that decision. Second, Lily told me what happened last night. Here we go. Yes, he sighed. He wasn't pleasant, and she got very scared. He paused, unsure on how to proceed. He didn't want to explain the reason of their argument, and to buy time, asked Rainey, she told you about the kissing, I guess? That was serious, though. Well, that is what she thought had happened, but she told me what she heard, and even if she couldn't understand the word, she repeated more or less correctly, and I couldn't fail to grasp the meaning of it. Fuck! He half opened his mouth in surprise. He didn't realize that could happen. He needed to do something about it straight away. He almost jumped up to go and stop Lily repeating to the word what she didn't understand. Ted, divining this, said calmly, I told her not to repeat that to anybody, not even Susie or her brothers. I made her promise. He exhaled. He exhaled a big breath of relief. Thank God, you are the best, thank you. Ted returned sitting on the rug, legs crossed, and looked at him searchingly. I'm concerned for you, he said in his kind of spiritual way that always made Harry smile. Don't worry, Ted, I will find a solution. He was thankful he didn't have to choose to justify himself to him. He wasn't the kind of person who judged, and he didn't seem to regard with surprise or horror or any particular feeling what he had apprehended. And moreover, he knew he could rely on him to keep this matter quiet. Harry, don't take this as a criticism, but Ron has always been more open about himself than you had ever been, and therefore is easier to understand. Harry interrupted him. Sorry, didn't get that. What do you mean to say? You are much more closed off than Ron. Am I? He asked, raising his eyebrows in amazement. You are. You barely tell anything about yourself, your past, or what you feel about things, which is telling anyhow, but no matter. It was the first time he told him this, and he felt somehow in defect, especially in his regard. He had taken care of him since he was little, and he had always considered himself to be quite open with him. He wanted to be open with him. It was also true that, unlike his kids, Ted wasn't the kind of person that would ask many questions, more of the kind that waited to be told. Do you want to know something about me? He asked hesitantly. I don't wish to be told anything you have no pleasure in saying, and in any case, I don't need you to. One can understand a lot from what is left unsaid. He felt exposed, like if he understood something about him he didn't or wanted to know. How come you grow up so bizarre? He asked to loosen up the conversation. He laughed merrily, which brought him back to his age in a moment. I don't know. Maybe I've been spoiled by everybody too much. That made me odd. He had a very different childhood from other children. Andromeda was officially taking care of him, but he was basically a communal child. He was dividing his time with many families, Harry and Julie and Ginny mostly, but also with Ron and Hermione, Bill and Fleur, Molly and Arthur, loved and pampered by everybody for Tonks and Lupin's sake. He probably never had a lonely hour up going to Hogwarts. Everybody was always very careful he wouldn't have to suffer in not having any mom or dad. For that reason, he got many. He learned very young what happened to them, and if he grieved for it, Harry knew not. Andromeda and him always tried to impress on his mind to be proud of his parents. Ted was aware of his dad having been a werewolf, but he had been taught not to regard it as anything wrong. This abnormal upbringing could hardly produce a normal child. Anyhow, Ted continued, resuming his tedious glare, I just wanted to put you on your guard against Ron. I met him with him recently, and I could read in his words and behavior. He felt bitter and unsatisfied. It was worse than the last time I saw him. I don't know if, when, and why this thing happened with Hermione, but I fear that it might be the drop for him. He has too much resentment inside, and you unfortunately have got everything he wishes to have. And it has always been like that. He's very attached to you, but it is a kind of love hate feeling, if you know what I mean. And right now, hate is predominant. You became the scapegoat. He was fiddling with a piece of paper he found on the floor, looking straight into Harry's eyes. Harry was very impressed by his words. He knew it all already, but it nonplussed him, nevertheless, how much Ted understood about them. He cleared his voice. Thank you for having told me this, Ted. No problem, he said, standing up, like he just spoke about the weather. How is it with Victoire? Still going strong? He asked to change the subject. Ted's face illuminated with animation, a most unusual thing with him, always very composed. He immediately sat close to Harry to talk about her. She is amazing. Harry smiled at his enthusiasm. I know, the villa influence is powerful, isn't it? He looked at him hesitantly. Yes, it is, but I'm not talking about that. What do you mean? It hasn't got any effect on you? He grew very interested all of a sudden. As far as he knew, that charm didn't fail with any man. Ted was so odd, though, that maybe it was different for him. He does all right, he said, chuckling. But I can understand when she's turning it on. I feel it, but I can disassociate it. Do I make myself clear? Uh, he tried to explain himself better. I recognize it and I can control it. I don't like her because of it. I like her because she's smart, sensitive, positive, and cheeky. She makes me crazy, he said, beaming, a smile going from ear to ear, eyes dreaming, and finally looked again like the not much older than a teenager that he really was. Harry grinned, happy to see him so much in love. You must be careful, he said, joking. She's going to have plenty of boys around her. I know, he admitted, smiling. But I'm not worried. They can be very faithful, these villa women, when they are in love. I noticed that with Victoire's mom and grandma. Harry recognized that it was probably true. Fleur could have chosen any man she wanted, but she never faltered in her love to Bill. And it seemed the same with her mother, considering that her father wasn't exactly the most handsome man. On the moment, they heard knocking at the door. It was Lily, asking if they were going to go home. He stood up, ready to go, and invited Ted for dinner. Lily was already lighting up with happiness, but Ted refused. No, I'm sorry, I can't. Grandma made something special for dinner. And he winked at Harry. He knew what he meant. Ted, as long as he could remember, had always refused to eat animals, and Andromeda, who would try at any length to make him happy, was always striving to cook something special, experimenting new ingredients and stranger routes. The result was not always agreeable. Harry sometimes amused himself thinking about what Lupin would have said of Ted's vegetarianism. He would have probably found it funny, and maybe he would have secretly felt relieved on how far from a werewolf this tendency was. Good luck then, smirked Harry. He took Lily by the hand, and refusing politely an invitation for dinner, go back home. The end of chapter 9. We made it. Hmm. um, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of obvious, like in the seven books of the Rowling, that Harry and Hermione are very touchy. They always like hug and take hands and everything, and I always wondered how like Harry's partner would react to it. I mean, it's Ginny, and Ginny is Hermione's friend, and they are all friends, and Ginny know that it's just friendship. But yeah, anyway, after finding out something like that, I understand her having second doubts. Do you think Harry would end his relationship with Hermione if Ginny gave him an ultimatum? That's a good question. I don't know. I never thought about that. Um, I think. Hmm, good question. I think it probably would. I think it probably would because probably he ranks family maybe higher than friendship. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but yeah, he is married to her and he has children with her and he's living with her. Um, I think he probably would, or at least he would try. Um, Maybe there would be some kind of arguments about it. He would try to make a change her mind, but yeah, I think eventually he would probably. What do you think? Mafoy it's probably over 100 girlfriends by now. Nobody has anything to complain. Oh, you are so right. He actually say in the end of the seventh book that he is married. Or maybe I don't know if I remember properly, but I think he is married. But yeah, I'm kind of sure he cheats. He cheats on her. Yeah, probably is over 100 girlfriends by now. That was funny. But anyway, we are at the end of the three chapters, and yeah, tonight was quite long. Actually, it's already almost 10:30. Okay, so I guess we will see each other the next week, and we will carry on with three other chapters. And yeah, we will find out how things developed, if they managed to calm down Ron, if they will make peace. Who knows? I find it difficult, but maybe it will happen. Who knows? Nothing. I'm sorry for the beginning. It's just keeping crashing down. I will need to understand why it happens. And hopefully it won't happen again the next week. So, yeah, good night. See you next week. Thank you for having been here with me.